All Indiana Politics is your premier source for Indiana politics, focusing on issues that matter to you.
I still want us to be the best in the Midwest.
We can't afford another lockdown.
Give the citizens of this country the relief they need.
Education in the state of Indiana remains priority number one.
In-depth, nonpartisan coverage.
We don't know exactly where the economy will be in January.
People are worried with good reason.
Exclusive interviews with Indiana's political leaders.
We have the resources here in the state of Indiana to care for those who are in need.
Expert analysis on critical legislation.
We need to reform those laws.
This recovery is going to take some time.
We've got to anticipate that there'll be a budget shortfall.
From Wish TV, this is All Indiana Politics Podcast on the All Indiana Podcast Network.
Good Sunday morning. Welcome to another edition of All Indiana Politics. I'm Phil Sanchez. An extraordinary dissent from the state's highest judge, Chief Justice Loretta Rush, recently dissented on an order upholding an Orange County man's 16-year drug sentence. She talked exclusively to our senior investigative reporter, Richard Essex, about her opinion. Here's part of that conversation.
One of the things you wrote in the opinion is this case highlights the disparity among Indiana counties with respect to meaningful sentence alternatives for those suffering from substance disorder. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Well, we have 148 problem-solving courts in different counties, but we have whole areas that don't have them. And so what I don't want to see is sort of justice by geography. If you live in a county that has a problem-solving court, you're able to work the program, has a lot of oversight and accountability through meetings and drug testing, and keep your job, stay with your family, and contribute to your community. But if you live in a county that doesn't, it could be 5, 10, 15 years in jail. You've got to have accountability for the criminal behavior. That's there. You know, methamphetamine is the #1 drug that we're seeing right now in courts in Indiana, and it's ravaging families, communities. So when you're dealing, there has to be a component, but we also have to treat the person who's the addict, because one leads to the other. I mean, we have a number of cases, and everybody knows somebody, right, or a family member, or somebody that started off with a sports injury in high school. I just met with the state championship baseball team. You get a sports injury, you get prescribed medication, that's done, and then you get addicted, and then you turn to other drugs.
Are we going to be able to fund, I know that's up to the General Assembly, but is funding going to be a big part of the geographical aspect of this?
I think it'll have to be. And then also for smaller communities, you're going to see counties band together and have it because they might not have the resources to have one. So a big push for me with the General Assembly this year is to fund drug courts instead of funding tail end, which is the DOC and long periods of incarceration.
We're talking about the people who have been drug dealers and who have become addicts. Then there's some victims to this too. There's the guy that lives next door to the drug dealer. There's the family that had a son or a daughter that became an addict because of this.
Right.
What do we say to those people?
Well, you deal with the crime. You can't overlook. Our job is to not overlook the crime. There's got to be consequences with regard to the criminal behavior, and there's going to be just punishments given to the criminal behavior. You've got a person who's an addict. You treat addiction as a disease, a treatable disease, and you punish the criminal behavior.
Well, we're just over a week away from the municipal primaries, and one of the biggest races in Carmel. Incumbent Mayor Jim Brainerd is leaving office after an unprecedented 7 terms. 3 Republicans are running to succeed him. They are Fred Glynn, Kevin Ryder, and Sue Finkham. We begin with Fred Glynn. He recently sat down with our government reporter, Garrett Berquist.
Let's welcome in Fred Glynn. Fred, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Why are you running for mayor of Carmel?
I think I am offering a different vision than the other 2 candidates that are in the Republican primary. Both very good people, but I think it's time to pivot a little bit on the development. I think that we have enough mixed use. We have enough of the high density housing as for a ratio per 1,000 residents. Time to pivot a little bit and focus on neighborhoods, focus on fiscal responsibility. Downtown, we could focus on dining and entertainment options and really try to pivot to the neighborhoods and preserve some of our neighborhoods some of them are being gentrified and others aren't being serviced like they need to. And I think overall that's a better long-term vision for our community to create vibrancy in our city for long term.
You say on your website that you want responsible development.
Yes.
What does that look like?
Responsible development means to me that you're not using taxpayer money to do it. One thing I read is a large study by a large consulting firm named KPMG, and they talked about something called a people-oriented vision. And they talk about not only keeping your residents that are there, but attracting new residents between the ages of 20 to 34, having them want to come to your community that are in the fields of engineering, science, and entrepreneurs. And they start the small businesses, and government then becomes a referee. That's responsible development because we're not using other people's taxpayer dollars to do it. Over the past 28 years, we've racked up debt in the form of tax increment financing, and that's been used to dominate the type of development that they want in our city. I think it's time for a little bit more responsible development that's not putting our people in debt and serves the community as a whole.
Speaking of that debt, at last check, that's clocked in around $1.5 billion. How do you pay that down?
Well, a lot of it is TIF. Hopefully the tax increment financing district that it attached to will be successful, so then those TIF districts will generate the tax revenue to pay back the bonds. That's how TIF works. But in some cases, that's causing a strain on, it's not being used to fund any local government services. So that's kind of an issue with that TIF. So you have these new residents coming in, these new businesses, and if they got to be serviced by police, fire, or whatever else that needs to be serviced, there's no money going towards that. But we would have to bring in an outside firm, and I've done that when I was in county government, brought in a consulting firm to do an efficiency study of county departments. We would need to do that same thing in Carmel to really figure out a good fiscal plan going forward to get that paid down so we could protect taxpayers of the city.
You mentioned gentrification as well. That's certainly not an issue that's unique to Carmel, but how would you get out in front of it?
Well, the biggest thing that I want to do, and I've talked to other communities about this, I came up with this idea and then I talked to people that were in other communities, and they're starting to implement it because they're seeing what we're doing in Carmel and they don't want it to happen in their area. One thing that we could do is, we don't want to control every aspect of development, but when I talk about preserving neighborhoods, it's important to have different type of neighborhoods in every city that you're in. And what you can do is put an ordinance in place that says, look, if you knock down this house and rebuild another one, it needs to be comparable to the other houses that are in the community. So in some of those areas, you'll see a $150,000, $200,000 house next to an $850,000 house. It looks very intrusive into the community. If we can turn around and try to preserve those other areas, we got Home Place, we got areas right now that they're going after on 116th and River Road, that would be better long term. Now, I'm not saying that they can't rebuild homes or sell their homes. It just needs to be comparable to the neighborhood that it's in, to at least the 3-4 houses that are going to be around it. That would be one way to preserve it.
Jim Brainerd drew national attention for his environmental initiatives, and that sometimes put him at odds with the National Republican Party. What are your environmental plans?
My environmental plans, if you look at his environmental plans, he talks about things like the global warming and that type of thing. Obviously, I'm not discussing that, but my environmental issues will involve making sure that we preserve grass. When a development comes in there, we want gathering spaces for the communities that they're going to be housing. A lot of these apartments right now, it's nothing but concrete. We need to have gathering spaces in there, maybe a small playground. So if you're living in an apartment and you go outside, there's a place for you to gather or take your child or that type of thing. That would be a big thing that I would do that I think would be more on the environmental side, preserving that green space. And any development that comes in, you can sit there and say, look, you need to have so much grass here, you need to have gathering spaces, you need to have maybe a playground for the kids that are going to be living there. That would create long-term vibrancy in our community. When you drive around, you'd see people out. You'd see that vibrancy in the community that we're not seeing now. Those apartments that are on, most of the apartments that are there and that stuff that's being built, it's just all concrete. They might have a swimming pool area and that's about it.
You've also called for improved infrastructure. What specifically are you looking for, and how would you go about getting it?
That's where I want to give Jim Brainerd credit on some of the stuff he's done, like Keystone Parkway. He did that. Highway 37 is being modeled after Keystone Parkway right now. So I'm not saying that we haven't done a good job on infrastructure. But I've been speaking to different neighborhoods now, and we just need, I think, better paving plans for places like Village of West Clay. That's one. Some of the other neighborhoods that need street lights, that type of thing. When I'm talking about infrastructure, is really, it's part of my starting to focus on neighborhoods plan.
A lot of the goals that you've outlined involve essentially slowing down growth. How do you ensure that Carmel doesn't overcorrect and end up halting its growth entirely?
Well, I don't think it involves slowing down growth. It's just not using taxpayer incentives to do mixed-use development and high-density housing. That's the biggest difference. And if you bring a development in, it needs to be more friendly to people that are going to be gathering there and really contribute to the community. That's really the only difference. So I'm not saying that I don't want any development. I just don't think that we need to keep doing that type of development, and I don't think that we need to constantly use this tax increment financing or other people's tax dollars to control what type of development comes in the community. We could set certain standards and play the referee, saying, look, if you do this type of development here, we want a certain amount of grass, we want a certain amount of gathering spaces there. That if that development starts spreading across the community, that'll be much more better long-term resiliency of the city and make it a much more attractive place to live in the long term. But it's not talking about stopping development or stopping growth. That's not what my agenda is.
What do you believe sets you apart from the other candidates in this Republican primary?
Well, the stuff that I've been discussing here is I'm the only one discussing this type of things on my platform. That's the number one thing. The number two thing, I have a reputation for my 8 years in the county council that what I say I'm going to do, I actually do, and I've never been called dishonest. There might be detractors that I have in the community, but nobody's ever said I've been dishonest. So you know that what I propose, that I'm going to at least try to implement. And I got a proven record as a fiscal conservative and doing what's right for taxpayers and standing up for my constituents, even when it's tough to do so. I think the only person that race that has had to make those tough decisions, but every tough decision that I've made has aged well. After it might have been not popular at the time, but after a while, it was proven to be the right thing to do.
Coming up, we continue our coverage of the Carmel mayoral primary with Kevin Ryder. Welcome back. We continue our coverage of the Republican primary for mayor of Carmel with Kevin Woody Ryder. Our government reporter, Garrett Berquist, sat down with him during the campaign.
Let's welcome in Kevin Woody Ryder. Woody, thank you for dropping by today.
Glad to be here.
Why are you running for mayor of Carmel?
I've been in Carmel for 40 years. Carmel's pretty much given me my life. It's my way of giving back. I've been on the city council for the last 16 years, 12 of those on the plan commission. Our mayor's retiring, and I think we need strong leadership to follow him up.
On your website, you say, and this is a direct quote, it's critical to engage in meaningful conversations and create actionable outcomes. What do you mean by that?
On my 16 years on city council, and especially the 12 years on plan commission, I make it a point to involve the public. You want people to understand what's happening. They give them all the information. The more information you give people, the better your buy-in. Everything we do is for our taxpayers. So we want them to feel a sense of home. So they need to be part of what we do.
How do you generate that sense of home?
You engaging people. The more people feel involved, the more connected they feel. That gives them the sense of home. It then belongs to them. Everything we do is focused around what's best for our taxpayers and the synergy of our community.
Carmel now has about $1.5 billion in debt. How do you plan to pay that down?
We're already paying it down. Every piece of debt that we have is on a payment schedule. Only 17% of our revenue is used to pay our debt. But I look at our debt, I think it's been made more of a political football in the last few elections. It's an investment in our taxpayers. Without that amount of money that we've spent, we wouldn't have the infrastructure we have. We wouldn't have the companies that want to come. We stay proactive on our infrastructure. It gives people a reason that they want to come to Carmel. So I really look at it as an investment. I don't look at it as a negative.
How do you manage Carmel's growth without bringing it to a halt entirely?
The mayor, when he first got elected in '96, had a broad canvas. He could paint pretty much what he wanted, and he had a vision, and he's fulfilled it. I think the next mayor is going to have more of a dartboard. It needs to be very focused development. We need to look at what our needs are, and I think we can be picky. We've created the atmosphere. People want to be in Carmel. So, it'll be more of a targeted development.
Can you give me some examples of that?
Examples would be, we're looking for ways to create empty nester housing for people that are selling their homes. In the last 5 years, we have a number of those who are going out to the communities around us. We want to stop that. I also want attainable senior housing. I've been talking to a couple developers about some ideas on that. And then we have, without getting into specifics because then it makes the land worth a lot more money, we have a couple of areas that are ripe for redevelopment.
Jim Brainerd drew national attention for his environmental initiatives. That sometimes put him at odds with the National Republican Party. What are your environmental plans?
Carmel has kind of set an example. Just last year, we passed a bond to connect all of our paths. We want people to have as many options as they can to interact with, whether they want to bike, whether they want to walk. All of our new garages and buildings that we do, we try and incorporate solar panels. We're transitioning our vehicles from gas to, first it was hybrid, now we're talking some electric. We'll do as much of that as we can, and we'll continue that.
What sets you apart from the other Republican candidates in this primary?
When I talk about my candidacy, my campaign is writer for Carmel. It's not writer against one or two other people. I'm focusing on what we're going to do, on our strong leadership and our strong team that we've built over the last couple of years.
Woody Ryder, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
And coming up, we conclude our coverage of the Carmel mayor's race with Sue Finkham. Welcome back to our coverage of the Republican primary for the mayor of Carmel, and it continues now with Sue Finkham. I sat down with her to discuss her reasons for running. Sue Finkham, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
I think the first question I have to ask you right out of the chute here is, why do you want this job? Why do you want to be the mayor of Carmel?
Well, Carmel's a fantastic place to live and to work, and I want to just keep growing it, keep making it the best place we can be for all of our residents and businesses combined.
So on your website, now I just want to jump in here a little bit. You talk about engaging residents, protecting Carmel's high quality of life. So how do you plan to do that?
Well, 3 priorities. First of all, crime prevention. The number one thing people talk to me about is what an amazing, safe place it is. You know, to go to parks and to walk on the street, and so that's top, first and foremost. And I'm honored to receive the FOP endorsement as well. That means that's very meaningful to me. But also through economic development, by continuing to go hunting for businesses that really fit Carmel. Businesses help keep our taxes low and keep us a vibrant place to be. And also through community engagement, as you've alluded to. I'm a person that likes to put my arms around everybody and get feedback, probably my marketing research kind of background, but I want to make sure that people don't feel left out of the conversation. They love the community. We have one of the most educated communities in the country. Why wouldn't we want to tap into that?
That brings me to my next question is, as you very well know, Carmel has about $1.5 billion in debt. So how do you grow, but also try to do right by that debt?
Well, first of all, I want to make sure you understand about half of that debt is not Carmel's debt, it's developer debt that we're not, quote unquote, on the hook for. It's the way the DL, Department of Local Government Finance, reports out. That's a little bit confusing. But all of our debt is scheduled out, just like if you have a mortgage, you know it's X number of payments over X number of years. All of our debt is scheduled out. There's no surprises coming. It only takes less than 20% of our revenue to cover that debt. So financially, we're fine. But that doesn't mean we can't be smart or take our eyes off the ball for have fiscal excellence. So we need to make sure we have lots of sinking funds and other things in case something happens that's outside of our control. But being aggressive with growth, and not by growing the city bigger, but by right businesses coming in and protecting our essential functions, we'll be fine.
Well, that's perfect segue here, because you do talk about growth, and I don't have to tell you, Carmel has grown tremendously over the past 20 years, let alone the past 5. So how do you continue to grow without going too big?
Well, I think we have to have smart development, right? Make sure we are not going too high, because I think this is going to change the character of our neighborhoods. Making sure we're not getting too close to our strong neighborhoods, because our neighborhoods are our original economic development, along with our great school system. So making sure that we're, again, engaging our citizens and also what they want to see. But we've got corridors that are prime for redevelopment. US 31, we can do infill. Pennsylvania Avenue. Carmel Drive and Range Line will continue to have economic development, redevelopment in those areas. And so again, we need to be smart. We don't have to say yes to everything that comes our way, and make sure that we're really, truly delivering value to our residents with this development. One thing I'd like to add too is Mayor Brainerd has said, hey, TIF, which is one of the tools we use for economic development, is a gift to future residents and future generations, and I agree with him. Our first TIF district will expire in 2028. We need to make sure we let some of those dollars come back to our city budget so our residents can appreciate the value of those.
You talked about Mayor Brainerd. He's very well known for his environmental initiatives. Sometimes not so in favor when it comes to national Republicans with those initiatives. Right. So how do you plan to to work when it comes to environmental issues?
Work closely with our residents. Again, they have a say in their community, which they pay taxes and live and work. Carmel did pass a climate action plan that we had lots of community input on, and so that was passed unopposed with a lot of support, and so continue to knock off those things we identified in that plan is important.
How do you feel about roundabouts?
I love roundabouts.
Why?
They're safer, they help us beautify the community, and as of now, they also are part of our identity. But we can be more than just roundabouts. We can also be the best run city in the country, and that's where I want to take us.
What makes you different from your other challengers?
Well, first of all, my professional experience. You know, I've spent 30 years in HR and marketing and administration and worked with some outstanding CEOs. So I know how to build a culture, I know how to drive for performance, I know how to engage our market. And so that's something that clearly differentiates me from my competitors, as well as my professional preparation and my passion.
And you're also somebody who's worked in the council as well.
I have. I've had the pleasure of serving for 12 years on the council, working to transform our sleepy suburb to a dynamic destination. I'm really proud of that work.
Okay. Sue Finkham, thank you so much for coming in. We really appreciate you taking some time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us for All Indiana Politics. We'll be back here next Sunday morning at 9:30. We'll also have a recap of the 2023 legislative session, and we will look forward and ahead to the primary on May 2nd.
From Wish TV, this is All Indiana Politics Podcast on the All Indiana Podcast Network. Watch All Indiana Politics live Sunday mornings at 9:30 on Wish TV and at wishtv.com. Subscribe to this podcast and listen weekly here on the All Indiana Podcast Network. And be sure to discover even more great podcasts at allindianapodcastnetwork.com.